So we are in our second week of our new semester. This semester we're studying The Hero's Journey, Joseph Campbell, the teachings of Joseph Campbell. And rather than have you read the academic book, The Hero's Journey, I've chosen the movie, Finding Joe. And I think all of you in the room now have seen the movie, Finding Joe. If you haven't, all of you, it's on our website. You can instant stream it. It's very important to me, though, that we have a study guide or something that we're basing this particular semester on. So I really hope that all of you in our extended community as well can watch the movie sooner than later. So last week we started off with beautiful story about the golden Buddha, the Thai story, the metaphor for all of us that we're all golden. Our friend from Tibet is here, Chuseng Rinpoche, and was sharing a little bit more of the stories about how in the Buddhist tradition we all believe that we are golden, that we all have the possibility for enlightenment. So we started with that story then, and looking at Joseph Campbell's work of looking at all the different stories from all over the world, all the different mythologies, and how he diagrammed and dissected those and found there to be one universal story in all of those. And what is that story? The Hero's Journey, which is what we're studying this semester. And in the what I love about the film is that they pull all these different stories into it through either people like we know Laird Hamilton or Tony Hawk, but also he pulled it through beautiful films that are familiar stories that we've known, like The Wizard of Oz for years, or newer films like The Matrix that we sort of all relate to. And so the film really begins like looking at these stories that we're all used to hearing our whole life, and how when we hear these stories of these superheroes or these people that made it through Rocky, you know, he was victorious, is that something within all of us is like ignited when we hear that and inspired, and we feel ourselves, we see ourselves in that. And so one of the reasons I chose to study this is because I feel like it is very important for us all to have this sense of our own journey, that we are the hero, we are the heroine in our own story of this life. And in doing that, it's really what gives our life meaning. It gives our life purpose. So otherwise, we just kind of wake up every day and it's like, oh, another day of like working, and then maybe I'll get to play tonight, and you know, challenges, and then joys. But at some point for all of us, we're like, what's the purpose? What's the meaning of our life? And so the hero's journey is about the different turns and twists that you take on your own path and your own journey, that you choose to give your life meaning, and what you choose to do with your life is very much part of your spirituality. And so for me, this journey that we're studying this semester is about each one of you owning the meaning and purpose of your life and being inspired by that spiritually. You know, that this is something in yoga that, like we said last week, the story of the golden Buddha is really the yoga story. You know, that we're all searching for the goldenness within ourselves, and when we find that goldenness, we want to share that with others. So the movie begins with The Wizard of Oz, of course. You know, and this is a beautiful example of the framework that we're going to look at, that Joseph Campbell has actually diagrammed in this universal story, this truth that's for all of us. Is there's this circle that we kind of see it through, and there's these different stages. What's the first stage of the hero's journey? Separation. And then we go from separation to initiation, and then it follows, we come back through return. And so I just want to give you an overview of that. So the Wizard of Oz is such a simple one, right? So the separation is the tornado, right? But prior to the tornado, I think it's interesting to note that she had gotten to a place with most of, when we look at the hero's journey, where she was a little bit dissatisfied, like not really appreciating her home and the people that were her friends or whatever on the farm or whatever. She was kind of like, this is boring, or this is not that. Then the tornado happens, right? And she goes through all these different challenges and things, and so all these different obstacles come up, and you know, then things that were scary, like, you know, we say the Wicked Witch of the West, but I think the monkeys were much scarier. But remember, like, being scared and her adventures, and she had to face these scary things and learned all these lessons along the way to come back to the red shoes, I almost said the golden shoes, that she taps at the end, that realized that all the time she could always go home, right? So all the time she was really golden, you know? But she had to go through these adventures and get all these experiences and pull them together in order to be able to have that return home and bring all that back to the community. So that's the overview of this idea of the hero's journey for all of us. So the other example I love to use is the Rocky story. You know, so old, but everyone knows that first movie. There are many movies. And I was saying last week, like, for anyone, when you hear that music, do 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 do, we're all like, no matter who you are or how old you are, you're like, something inside just like, yes, I can do it. I can do this practice today, the master's program. And I can just start playing the music for you guys, right? But in the Rocky, this is a really well-told story. Now remember, all of this is storytelling, and we find ourselves in these stories, and that's why the Rocky story was so popular. Like, how many of us are boxers, right? But we could relate to the story of this underdog, right? How does the movie start? What is Rocky Balboa's separation? Right. David was here yesterday. So a lot of people forget this fact. The very beginning of the movie, Rocky's thing was he went to this crappy gym, right? And he was like the lowest level boxer, barely getting any fights and losing them all, right? He was at the lowest level of all that. And the separation for him was when Mickey, who owned the gym, gave his locker to someone else and basically kicked him out that way, like, no, you can't practice here anymore. You stink. you're not even good enough to have a locker here anymore. And that was his separation, his original. That everything after that we all remember, like him chasing chickens and running through Philadelphia and all that other stuff. But every hero has to have that first kick from the universe or from yourself, or something that gives you that, where you're just doing the known, what we talked about a few weeks ago, or you're satisfied just enough, but not really, you know, that you have that kick that you don't want. No one ever wants to get kicked out of the gym, right? No one ever wants to get kicked out of your norm or your comfortable place. But that kick is what causes us to move into initiation and to find those challenges and to grow. So what are some other examples of, like, what you guys would say in life, not necessarily yours, but anyone's life, separation? What's examples of that? Either by yourself or by the universe? What? Moving? But what happens that makes you move? So thinking of things like that, like something happens that causes a couple to get a divorce. Then there's a divorce. That's a major separation from the known. You had to move. Your partner got another job somewhere else, even though you might have wanted to really stay here. Now you had to move somewhere else. Getting accepted into university. Looking to get accepted. So what I'd like everyone to do, and was going to give all of you your homework, and excuse me, our extended family their homework, is this, and I will kind of back up a little bit to where this came from. I was doing my puja on Fridays the way I normally do, and I wanted to do my homework, which I'm going to ask all of you to do. And so I went back and looked at the first chapter of my life, my first hero's journey, because what you're going to notice is this little pattern we're doing. There's like little patterns of it and bigger patterns of it. And just when you think it's all like crappy, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? You return, and then another one comes, right? And that's our lives. So I was thinking of my life as little Diana up until before junior high. My family moved. We lived on a farm. I didn't have any friends. I spent all my time like in the woods, very like thinking and really like loving my adventures by myself. My dad got me a huge horse, and I thought I was super cool because I was this little girl, but I had this big horse. We built barns. I spent my time with my brother and my dad, and we would go where barns were burnt down and get lumber that was still good to build our barns, and had chickens and stuff. All of those things I realized today, and there was challenges for me at school or different things, if I look back on them now, they very much are part of who I am today, part of defining like why I love to spend time alone too, why I'm so connected in nature, and all of these things very much are my story, and my story that makes me, my spirituality very much started at that time in my life, that I carry with me through today. So, and then I did a gratitude practice around it after I'd finished it. But what I'd like all of you to do is this semester is going to be a really fun semester. I did a week of this in Bali many years ago. But I want everyone to buy or get, I know everyone, I have just a blank notebook. It can be a journal or just any blank notebook. And I want you on the very first page of this notebook to put a big red circle in the middle that says, I am here. Is where you are today, your life, your job, your partnership, your whatever. This is going to just say, I am here. And then the next page I want you to flip over, and I want you to do this for homework. I want you to think of your life up until junior high. And I want you to start somewhere. And it's always interesting where we choose to start in our mind. I chose to start with when we moved to the woods, when we moved to the country, we call it. But wherever you start in your mind, I want you to play that story out. And I want it to go like this, because sometimes it's hard to start this. So I'm going to use Rachel as an example. I want you all to think that, like if Rachel and I went out for coffee and I said, Rachel, I want you to tell me your story. What happened? What were you like as a little girl? And Rachel begins to tell me, what would you say to me? How would you describe it to me? And I want all of you to think about doing it that way. Like I get to have a coffee with each one of you in the room, and you're going to sit down and say, I'm telling Diana my story. She knows me today. I'm here. But she doesn't know my history. She doesn't know how I got here. So you're going to tell me your story. And you can write words, you can write paragraphs, you can write pages and pages and pages. It doesn't matter as long as you have that experience of telling your story, because you will not know where you're going to go with this. It's kind of like a meditation practice. One path leads you. When I start talking about barns being burnt down and we built chicken coops, then I want to tell you that my dad, like years later, undid the chicken coop and made me a stereo cabinet out of the chicken coop. But I remembered that. It's the things that we don't always remember this till all of a sudden we have this beautiful experience of going through like, what happened in my life? What got me to who I'm here? So I want you guys to have that as really this beautiful experience of telling your story. And then the second part of this, because I won't see you guys next week, the second part of this piece is I want all of you to, on a whole different piece of paper in here, is I want you to start to think of stories that you identify with. Maybe you really identified with the Rocky story. When we were younger, I said that we, as a family, we saw the first Rocky movie at the outdoor theater with those little things on the windows, like, and that movie really meant a lot to our family. We had just opened a little tiny family restaurant, and it was special to us, But so it became like part of, our story a little bit. But I want you to think of like, what are stories that you've always related to, movies that you could watch 1,000,000 times because something inside you is like, it speaks to you. What heroes do you identify with? Wonder Woman just came out. I have some friends that really identify with the goddess Diana's story. What deities, in the Hindu tradition, Deepak Chopra's in the film, and he talks about the beauty of identifying with the divine. Is it Lakshmi? Is it Ganesh? And kind of invoking that through you sometimes. So on a different page, I want you to just think of what stories do you identify with? What people, what heroes do you identify with? And it could be someone who's alive today. I identify with like some authors, like I really identify with Annie Dillard's writing, and so she's kind of one of my heroes, or Isaac Denison out of Africa. So think about that. Think of those stories that you identify with and write those down in your journal. And think about this, we're going to end on this. Your journal is going to have a cover, and the cover is going to be your story. So I was saying it could be like Diana's story, but that's kind of boring. So I was thinking more like Catcher in the Rye. I'm thinking about that. So just let it kind of, at some point you'll be like, oh yeah, this is what I'm going to name my story. So, and by the way, I just saw the movie of the author Catcher in the Rye, a very good film. But that is your homework for this week and for next week. And so I'm sorry this was a little longer than usual. And T, you can just put the quote on the thing. As always,